Good evening, YouTube, BookTube. This is Johnny. Thought I'd make a video since it's quiet around the house. My wife went to a women's Bible study at her church tonight. My wife is always running off. Last night she had a women's book club meeting. And yeah, she's always going off. But I like her. She finds that enjoyable, and what I find enjoyable is staying at home and reading my books and writing in my diary and watching the birds and just living a quiet, simplistic little life in suburbia in a small town in West Michigan. It is April the 10th. It's a Wednesday night. It's 6:46 here inside. It's 6:46 here tonight. It is 70 degrees inside my little cave. Inside of, you might say, my cave is on Mount Zion, the heavenly Jerusalem. Anyway, I just thought I'd make a video, let it swing. I don't really prepare. I don't have any manuscripts in front of me. I just going to talk about what I read. Somebody commented and asked me how many books I read a day or what I read a week. Well, I just read, and I've made this comment in videos, and I've made this comment in my videos. I just read because I like the activity of reading. I don't feel bad if I don't read a book to the end. Now, I do read some books to the end, maybe a novel, but like, I'd be surprised if I was reading this morning for my morning devotions, Being in Christ, a biblical and systematic investigation and reform perspective by Hansberger. Now, I've read 187 pages of Being in Christ, and if I read it to the end, that would be really amazing. Now, I'll read this usually I read a book for a couple weeks, 2 or 3, maybe 4 weeks, and I might put it aside, and then I might pick it up a month later, or 6 months later, or sometime in the future when I get interested in the whole theology of union with Christ, mystical union with Christ, participation in Christ, things like that. If I get interested in that subject in the future, then I'll get the book out again. Or I might read it to the end. Right now, I'm on the section where he goes in discussing the Apostle Paul on being in Christ, participation in the story of Christ, the Apostle Paul. So I don't know. So, and then I might read that in the morning, or I've been reading, I got this in the mail the other day, I showed you guys, More Reflections on the Book of Job, Volume 5, Books 23 to 27 by Greg the Great, translated by Brian Kerns. Now, I was reading this the other morning. I read, 39 pages in the morning. Things like that. And then in the afternoons, I'll read. Yesterday, I read, for a couple of hours, I read Maury Chute's novel, Merryman. I've showed this. I've read in this novel 477 pages. Now, I might finish this because I really like this novel. It's not, I just really like reading it and reading about Egypt, Maine, and these people and small town in Maine and all the different kinds of people. I really enjoyed this, so I'll probably finish this to the end. And today I read some more of Faculty of Dreams by Sara Stridsberg. This is translated as Swedish by Deborah, Bragan-Turner. This is very experimental. It's very way out there, and I've read 77 pages of it. Now, I could read this and probably I could read it in a day. It's very, if you look at it, it's not that dense, the text. It's almost like reading poetry or dream kind of consciousness, kind of trippy, kind of feverish, kind of way out there. It's kind of like when I'm reading this, I get the impression the woman just sat down and whatever came to her head, she wrote it down. So I've been reading that. And then I read this afternoon, Nervous States, Democracy, and Decline of Reason. I was reading this last month, and I got it out and read for about an hour, 2 hours, Nervous States, Democracy, and Decline of Reason by William Davies. And then I read, I've been reading this, The Lazarus Project. I read this early afternoon by Aleksandar Hemon. Now, I've read half of this. I've read 131 pages. It's 292 pages. I might finish this. I kind of like this, so I probably finish that. And then I got in the mail 2 books yesterday. I got a New York Review book classic original. This is by Victor Serge. He was a Russian kind of exile, anarchist, communist. And these are his notebooks. The New York Review of Books have published several of his writings, almost 3 or 4 of his novels. And I just thought I like reading memoirs and notebooks and journals and letters. So I got this one first, and if I like this, I might pick up another of his novels that's published by the New York Review of Books. So I've been reading this evening. I've read 31 pages. And then I got in the mail yesterday the new D.C. Boyle book, Historical Fiction, Outside Looking In. This is on Timothy Leary. It says here, a provocative new novel from best-selling author T.C. Boyle, exploring the first scientific and recreational forays into LSD and its mind-altering possibilities. In this stirring and insightful novel, D.C. Boyle takes us back to 1960s into the early days of a drug whose effects have reverberated widely throughout our culture, LSD. In 1943, LSD is synthesized in Basel, Switzerland. 2 decades later, a cadre of grad students at Harvard is gradually drawn into the inner circle of renowned psychologists and psychedelic drug enthusiast Timothy Leary. Fritzly Lonely, a psychological PhD student, and his wife Joanna become entranced by the drug's possibilities, such that their, quote, research becomes less a matter of clinical trials and academic papers and instead turns into a freewheeling exploration of mind expansion, group dynamics, and communal living. With his trademark humor and pathos, Boyd moves us from the Lonely's initiation into one of Leary's parties to his notorious summer seminars in Zurich, it's New Mexico, to the Lonely's eventual expulsion from Harvard and their introduction to a communal arrangement of 30 devotees, students, wives, and children living together in a 64-room mansion and committing themselves to all kinds of experimentation and questioning. Is LSD a belief system? Does it allow you to see God? Can the Lonely's marriage, or any marriage for that matter, survive the chaotic and sometimes organistic use of psychedelic drugs? Witty and wise, outside looking in, explores an ideal subject for this American master and highlights Boyd's I can't pronounce that word. Atrobratic? I can't pronounce the word. Detailed plots and big ideas. It's an utterly engaging and occasionally trippy look at the nature of reality, identity, consciousness, as well as our seemingly infinite capacities for creativity, reinvention, and self-discovery. So that's what I got. I read last year this book The Most Dangerous Man in America, Timothy Leary, Richard Nixon, and the Hunt for the Fugitive of the King of LSD by Bill Maniusko and Stephen L. Davies. So I'm always reading books on psychedelics, LSD, drugs, mushrooms, the Amazon jungle, marijuana, farming. So I'm always interested in that subject, and I've been reading D.C. Boyle for as long as I can remember. I think I started reading him like in the late 70s, D.C. Boyle. So that's what I mean when I read. I read all kinds of books. I'll read D.C. Boyle, and I'll read a nonfiction book, and then I'll read a memoir, notebooks, 1936 to 1947 by Victor Serge, translated by Mitchell Abidor and Richard Greeman. And then I'll read a novel, Lazarus Project, and then I'll read some more nonfiction, Nervous States, Democracy and Decline of Reason by William Davies. And then I'll read something very experimental, postmodernist, way out there, kind of crazy. Faculty of Dreams, Amendment to the Theory of Sexuality, or Valerie by Sara Stridsberg. And then I'll read some more, you know, just straight narrative, kind of narrative, literary fiction, The Merry Men by Carolyn Chute. Or I'll read some ancient commentary on the Book of Job by Gregory the Great. I'll read a New Testament Reformed theological look at union with Christ. Those are the kind of things. And I just read this throughout the week. And I have other things I'll read throughout the week. Last night before I went to bed, I looked through the New York Times, Sunday New York Times, and read some of that. And so, yeah. I did go to a thrift store yesterday. I had to go pick a prescription up at my local pharmacy. I found this novel, Godric, by Frederick Buechner. It says here, Frederick Buechner's Godric retells the life of Godric of Fincha, a 12th century English holy man whose projects late in life include that of purifying his moral ambition of pride, sin, spiritual yearning, rebirth, fierce asceticism. These hagiographic staples aren't easy to revitalize, but Frederick Buechner goes at the task with intelligent intensity, a fine readiness to invent what history doesn't supply. He goes on here. I have 3 or 4 other novels by him. Then I found this memoir, Spinster, Making Life of One's Own by Kate Bolick. And then I found this book, Call to Arms. This is nonfiction, Mobilizing America for World War II by Maury, Klein. So yeah, tomorrow's a Thursday. I don't plan to do anything tomorrow. Friday, I go back to the book nook, the library used bookstore. I don't know, maybe I'll find something there. I got books come in the mail throughout the month of April. I'll probably show those when they come in. So there's always books, there's always a flow of words. I'm always reading. I'm writing in my diary. Today I ended on page, in my 2019 diary, I've ended on page 320. Tomorrow morning, on April the 11th, 2019, I'll be on page 321. If I don't die in my sleep, or the Lord does not return to bring in the eternal state of the new creation, bring about the final judgment, the final resurrection of the dead, who knows? So I hope you're having a good week. I just thought I'd share you what I've been reading, where I'm at in my diary, some thrift store books. So this is how I read. Like I said, I just read all this stuff, and sometimes I'll finish something and something I'll just go on to something else. But to me, what's important is reading. I enjoy the activity of reading. So I'll just sign off. I hope you're having, like I said, a good week. And until next time, thank you for the comments. Thank you for the new subscribers. And yeah, so I'll sign off. Bye.